Good morning. This is the May 1, 2019 Nags Head Board of Commissioners meeting is called to order. You'll please join me in a brief moment of silence. And now, if you will, stand as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. The next item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and a motion would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda are recognitions. Cliff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our first recognition of a new employee will be done by our finance officer, Amy Miller.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'd like to introduce to you our new cashier and customer service representative, Shannon Krasnowski. Shannon is the new face of the town, and we are very lucky and happy to have her. She graduated from Plymouth High School and then from East Carolina University with a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Distribution and Logistics and a minor in business. Shannon is a newlywed and lives with her husband in Manio and has 3 teenage stepdaughters, and she enjoys fishing and spending time with her family. And you might recognize Shannon from working across the street at the BB&T Bank before it closed. Shannon has much experience in cash handling, customer service, and accounting and finance. Before she came to the town, she was a senior teller at BB&T. She got moved to the Kildable Hills branch. So she is familiar with handling money and the strict guidelines and responsibilities that come along with that. Along with that also comes her ability to multitask, quickly shift gears, and triage customer service. Shannon is well versed in providing efficient, personal, professional, and courteous service in all situations. She even received professional development and customer service training from the Disney Institute for Creativity and Innovation. She always has a smile on her face, and we are already receiving compliments from customers and citizens on how helpful and friendly she is. There's certainly a lot going on in the town with major projects and initiatives, including stormwater, Dowdy Park, and beach nourishment. And before she even interviewed with us, she was proactive in familiarizing herself with initiatives outlined on our website in order to have a seamless transition into this position. She's the first point of contact, so that enables her to answer questions right off the bat. With that being said, she's able to work independently and she catches on quickly. Shannon has an easy personality that just fits right in with everyone, and she's clearly a great addition to our department, and I'm glad everyone here gets to meet her today. So with that being said, welcome, Shannon. I'm very glad to have you. Thank you.
Next, I'll ask Charlie Bliven to come forward to recognize an employee with fleet maintenance with 5 years of service.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Charlie Bliven, Fleet Maintenance Superintendent for Town of Nags Head. Mrs. Peter Wackelman came to us in 2013 part-time, and then it worked into full-time in April 28, 2014. We're really happy to have him. Pete lives in Grandy and does a great job for the town, well-versed in diesel mechanics, and we're happy to have him.
I'll ask the planning director to come forward for two recognitions, one for the permitting coordinator for 15 years, and then water quality coordinator for 20.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to recognize Lily Nieberding for her 15 years of service to the town of Nags Head. Lily is the town's permitting coordinator. She began her employment with the town of Nags Head on April 19th, 2004. Lily started in public works before moving to the planning department. Most recently, Lily has led the transition to the Munis permitting platform and assisted with coordination of the new website. In my short 1.5 months working with Lily, I've appreciated her accountability and adaptability related to the town's permitting program. And I should not fail to mention that Lily is the proverbial messenger and occasional bearer of bad news. And we are forever grateful for her to serve that role. And thank you for your service.
Appreciate you. A small gift for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Time flies when you're having fun, that's it.
I'd like to recognize Todd Kraft for his 20 years of service to the town. Todd is the water quality coordinator for the town and the department. Todd began his service with the town on April 13th, 1999. And I believe Todd also started in the Public Works Department, which I think it holds true that if you want longevity in the planning department, you go steal somebody from Public Works. Sometimes. Todd continues to go above and beyond, growing and involving the septic health program and managing sand relocation. In my short time working with Todd, I've been impressed by his dedication and passion for his work and have observed firsthand someone who generally knows and values what being a public servant means. I think it's an understatement to say that Todd goes above and beyond and does whatever's asked and asked to do more. So thank you for your service, Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Great job, Tom. Congratulations.
I'd like for the board to come forward to take a picture with Todd, if you would.
I think we should do it again.
You're a sheep, not a leader, Will.
And our next item is the proclamation for National Police Week.
Mayor, Commissioners, I just want to tell you how appreciative I am for y'all to consider this proclamation. Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day, May 15th, was set aside by John F. Kennedy in 1962, and it's a time for us to remember those that have fallen in the line of duty, but I think it's more than that. It's a time for us to remember those who are working today. So if you know an officer or see an officer, keep them in your thoughts and prayers during this time, and always for that matter, and thank them for the job that they do.
Thank you. And so, if I may, I'll read the proclamation. The proclamation for National Police Week. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week, and whereas the members of the Nags Head Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the residents and visitors of the town of Nags Head, and whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agency, and that members of our law enforcement agency recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas the men and women of the Nags Head Police Department unceasingly provide a vital public service, now therefore the Nags Head Board of Commissioners calls upon all citizens of the town of Nags Head and upon all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 12 through 18, 2019 as Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies and observances in which all our people may join in commemorating law enforcement officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to their community, and in so doing have established for themselves an enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and security of all citizens. Therefore, we do hereby proclaim the week of May 12 through 18, 2019 as Police Week, and call upon all citizens of Nags Head to observe the 15th day of May 2019 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of those law enforcement officers who, through their courageous deeds, have made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their community, or who have become disabled in the performance of duty, and let us recognize and pay respect to the survivors of our fallen heroes, this the first day of May 2019. And a motion to adopt this proclamation would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But also, I'd like to, if you might, if it's okay, I want to introduce Deputy Chief Perry Hale. He has a few words that he would like to offer as well.
Yes,
Thank you.
certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. If I can get through this, I'm coming over a head cold, and I want to talk to y'all a little bit about Earl Murray. Earl was a good guy for those who all knew him. I know I worked with him for about 9 years. Lieutenant Montgomery worked with him for about 10 years. He didn't say a whole lot, but when he said it, you knew what he said he meant, and he would take you up on it and hold his word. He was that kind of man, and to go ahead and get one of his favorite words out there, dadgummit was his favorite word to say. But a little bit about it. In the early morning hours of May 15, 2009, Nags Head Police Sergeant Earl Murray Jr. was dispatched to a burglary in progress. While responding to this call, Sergeant Murray's vehicle hydroplaned, striking a cement utility pole, and was killed instantly. Murray was a veteran law enforcement officer with over 26 years of experience. He loved being a cop and truly believed in the age-old code of do unto others if you would have them do unto you. Sergeant Murray left behind a wife, Miss Kim, and two daughters, Sammy Jo and Paige. The town of Nags Head lost a dedicated and generous police officer. His family lost a loving father and husband, but we all lost a true friend. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Sergeant Murray's death. As the chief stated earlier, next week is National Police Week, and a group of us will be heading to D.C. to honor Sergeant Murray in the nation's capital. We'll be joining together with other family members of fallen officers from around the country. Each year, there's an annual bike ride hosted by Law Enforcement United. This year, Earl's daughter Paige will be making this ride with officers from around the country to honor her father. I ask each of you to keep the Murray family in your thoughts and remember them in your prayers as the 10th year anniversary of his untimely death approaches. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
We do indeed keep the Murray family and his friends in our thoughts. We appreciate you bringing that memory forward. It's amazing how quickly 10 years goes by. I would ask any board members or staff who may have known Mr. Murray if they would like to say anything before we move on.
Only that he epitomized what Nags Head values in our police.
Thank you.
I was fortunate enough to work with him, and I can't echo Commissioner Cahoon's words any better. I mean, he understood what Nags Head was all about, and particularly what law enforcement in Nags Head was all about, and we lost a fine person on that day.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment, and I will turn this over to Mr. Leidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, the board will receive comments from members of the public. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding matters of concern that you may have. It is not an opportunity for dialogue with the board. The board usually does not respond to public comment. It's also not appropriate to address your comments to any individual member of the board, but if you will, address them to the Board of Commissioners as a whole. Anybody who wishes to address the board, if you will please approach the podium and start by telling us your name and where you live, and then address your comments to the board as a whole. I will be keeping time. There is a 5-minute limit for comments, and I will let you know when your time is up. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Nanette Griesi, and I have a letter to read from my husband. He's unfortunately out of town for business, so he couldn't be here. So I have his letter, and then I just have a few comments of my own on a little sticky note. Dear Mayor Cahoon and elected officials, I request this letter be read out loud and made part of public record for the May 1st, 2019 board meeting. We are longtime property owners in Nags Head, writing to express our deep concern and an urgent call to action regarding the need to take more deliberate approach to remove the Cherry Incorporated structure from Seagull Beach so that the $43 million beach renourishment project can be done properly and effectively. As a brief summary of the history from public record, the row of houses on Seagull, including the Cherry Town House, has been in state of disrepair for a decade since the Veterans Day storm of 2009. In 2011, the beach was renourished, but the presence of a row of damaged houses could not move sand under the houses. This in effect created a weak link within the shoreline, which put Seagull Drive Beach at a disproportionate risk for more beach erosion. We have seen the catastrophic consequences to the beach and road that no longer exists. Approximately 3 years ago, when the Sansoda lawsuit was being administered, the town made offers to the owner of the Cherry structure, but he declined. Since that time, the beach has continued to erode such that the septic tank is now exposed, falling apart on the public beach, and the structure is usually in the water. Meanwhile, the good citizens and property owners of South Nags Head, who pay taxes and take care of their property, have had to endure this eyesore and public safety hazards on our beach. We have had signs on the beach warning of hazards in the water, so not to swim. We are always on edge when our children are on the beach for fear of injury. Huge sandbags and debris on the beach, like a trash dump. Septic tanks, broken pipes, and wires exposed as if there are no standards whatsoever in terms of public safety or health. Dangling decks, stairs, and rotted wood falling from houses. This house has even been in National Geographic and many newspapers, added unwanted notoriety and embarrassment to property owners and visitors in the area. We're referred to as Ghetto Beach and the armpit of Nags Head. This has even affected the ability for lifeguards to access our beach, which again effectively negates our area to the health and public safety services we pay for through our taxes. As the governing body in Nags Head, I respectfully ask you if each or any of you would find this acceptable on a public beach you use. When you pay hard-earned money to buy or rent in our area to visit the beach in Nags Head, would you ever expect to find these things? Have you seen structures just rotting on a public beach for a decade anywhere else along the Atlantic coast with the economic resources of a town like Nags Head? You haven't, because any decent, reasonable government of sound judgment would not permit such things. It goes against the most basic expectations of public safety and common good. Are we South Nags Head property owners entitled to a safe, clean, and hazard-free beach? So here we are, approximately 10 years since the event that made these homes inhabitable, with another renourishment project beginning, and we have the same obstruction disrupting the proper engineering design to be fully effective. Our ask to you is to consider this structure a necessary expense and part of the renourishment project, as if it were a tree or another obstruction in the way. We have $43 million allocated for this project, with the city, I believe, paying $17 million. We're just asking if some additional contingency funds could be used to settle with the current owner and remove the obstruction. We pay our taxes for this replenishment project and a better beach, but those of us who use the Seagull Beach will not enjoy what we pay for. The town's inability to remove the home will affect us all. Since they can't replenish under this house, there will be a weak link that will cause our beach to erode more quickly. The greater good should prevail here. Engineers and bulldozers need to be able to replenish the sand without the interference of the house in the surf. This is exactly what happened the last time and why the beach eroded so badly along Seagull Drive. The bulldozers can't do their job with the shack in the way. We have to get it down. We want the same conditions and replenishment on our beach that are afforded to all the other citizens of Nags Head and the kind of beach we pay for when we bought our homes. Our ask and suggested course of action is to make removal of this structure and the safety maintenance of Seagull Beach an ongoing priority for the town, meaning that when debris is reported as removed, immediately reach out to the owner of the Cherry House to reach a settlement in good faith, remove the structure in time for replenishment, or overcompensate by adding additional sand in the surrounding areas, provide clear public visibility of what it has and is being done to remove this home on public website with simple guidance of how we citizens can lend support in terms of any legislative process in a proactive and impactful way.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, your time is up. You've had an extra 15
That was
seconds.
for my husband. Can I say my few words?
No, ma'am, you have 5 minutes total. You've now had 5 minutes and 27 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you, ma'am.
having me speak.
Next, Mr. Muller.
My name is Bob Muller. I live at 124 Old Cove Road. I want to open my remarks by congratulating the town on beginning another beach nourishment project, on the success of its stormwater project, and the amazing Dowdy Park Phase 2. All important town priorities: maintaining the beach, getting at the insidious stormwater problems that seem to be creeping up on us, and providing important recreation for citizens and visitors. Important town priorities that the town invested in. And it goes to just to prove some advice I was given a long time ago, that if you want to know what a government values, look at where they spend their money. The town of Nags Head values the beach, it values stormwater, and it values recreation, and it spends big sums of money there. Today you're going to talk about another issue. You're going to talk about finding a solution to workforce housing through accessory dwelling units. And I would argue that until the town decides that it wants to invest in that solution, not try and drive it through the market, the town will have no success in that. That's borne out by what staff told you about the success had by Dare County, by Kitty Hawk, by the town of Duck in creating ADUs for workforce housing. Virtually none have been created, or certainly not enough to impact the market at all. And I would suggest to you that similar results will be had in Nags Head, whether they're allowed in a reasonable area, such as is suggested in Focus Nags Head along the beach road, or in an unreasonable area throughout the residential neighborhoods where I believe they will cause enormous problems. I would urge the town, if it wants to address affordable housing, seasonal housing, workforce housing, housing issues in general, that they return to the advice, the policy statement that occurs in Focus Nags Head at L227, if I got it right. Okay, and research and explore other options to diversify types of housing accommodations within the town and create allowances for accessory dwelling units and other appropriate seasonal populations in the town. The town should look at a variety of housing units. Send it back to the planning board. Let them look at what's out there, whether it's improving multifamily, allowing accessory dwelling units in some sections of the town. And I'd encourage the town to consider investment in that process. This is what other towns do. You probably need to go in with the county and the other towns, but there are solutions out there, but they're going to require some money. The ordinance you have in front of you has enormous problems with it. The town does not have the ability to control ownership. The town has no legislative authority to control length of stay. You have no definition for occupancy, even though you try and control occupancy. The conditional use permits are very subjective, not objective, concrete elements that a developer can meet, as is advised by the Council of Government. I urge you to take the whole package and send it back to the Planning Board. Let them look at the workforce housing issue and bring forward some solutions to you. Thank you very much for your time and your service.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Anyone else?
Good morning, everyone. Happy first day of May. I am speaking in support of the letter that was read. Oh, my name is Ellen Heatwall, 101 East Seagull Drive in Nags Head. I'm speaking in support of the letter that was read by Nanette about the beach in South Nags Head. It's very, I don't know, disconcerting to think that we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of these houses being condemned because they are unfit to be repaired, and yet they are still sitting on our beach. And I will tell you that every summer I call the cops multiple times because there are people in those houses breaking windows, putting glass on the beach, and just vandalizing the home. It has become a wonderful bird sanctuary, I will tell you that, and I cannot even imagine what the mold level is in that home, that would not affect all of us. Nanette's husband was nice enough to take some pictures. I'd like to give them to you in lieu of perhaps a field trip to take a look at the beach. And when we look at the maps of where the beach is going to be nourished, you can see the little jut outs that are going around these houses. Again, $43 million project, I mean, that we are totally in support of. I happen to live on the beach side of the beach road, so I honestly believe my opinion is probably that of about 20 other households, because I pay that much more for that beach nourishment than they do on the other side of the street. And I am not disputing that at all, but I'd like the job done right, and I'd like it to be done in an effective manner. We love our beaches, we love our vacationers, and we need to maintain those. And Nags Head, I really feel, does such a great job. They're on the forefront of so many things for coastal issues. And I just see this as a huge letdown in every sense of the word. So I encourage you to drive out there, take a town truck and take a field trip and just see that this needs to be addressed. And as this gentleman said, we put so much money into our beaches, into our town parks, and so many other things, and yet this is hanging there as this horrible linchpin to having an effective beach nourishment. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Barbara Mascallo. My husband and I own 203 Altoona, which is down in South Nags Head area as well. I certainly support the letter from Jim Greasy and all that's been said so far about the beach and the condition of the houses. But my focus is just going to be on one area, since that's already been covered. Because I live on Altoona, this newest development with the Telasco House acquiring an address now part of Altoona. Before his house was a Seagull address, but apparently that has been changed, and now our private road has another house added to it and a piece of beach property. As the town often reminds us, when we try to seek some kind of services for our street, it is a private road. So therefore, we have the responsibility to care for that road and to take care of it, to maintain it, especially during storms. It costs people a lot of money to get the sand out of there. And now we have a beach property address on our, added to our street. The other thing that is concerning for us on Altoona is when we spoke with the dredge people, the man that we spoke to said that we are going to have a 12-foot berm, dune, whatever you call it, in that whole area of South Nags Head because of our vulnerability. So if that is the case, there will be that 12-foot berm at the end of Altoona. And if his Talasco's piece of property is used for parking so that he can access his Seagull address house, which is now Altoona address house, how is that going to be addressed? Like everybody else has said, we live on the beach side of the road, so therefore we pay extensive taxes, and we expect the town to protect our investment. And how will that piece of property be properly used so as not to damage any of the beach renourishment that is done at the end of our street? To me, that's really a big problem, and in the case of this Sansada property, I remember during that meeting, it was talked about that because the properties were on the beach, they would be four-wheel drive vehicle access only. Now, his parking will be on the beach. Is that going to be four-wheel drive access? What will that do to the end of our street, to the access onto the beach at the end of our street, to the 12-foot dune that is placed there by renourishment? So there's a lot of questions that we have, and I feel like because of the fact that our street is private, that it would have been nice for the homeowners of Altoona to be notified of this change of address beforehand and have a chance to voice our thoughts, concerns, or objections to that process. Because of the fact that our street is private, that we have to maintain it ourselves, and that wasn't really done. We found out about it through an email. It doesn't really seem quite fair to the people and the homeowners on our street. So that's basically what I wanted to address today, and hope that the board looks into this and makes sure that the beach renourishment will be protected at the end of our street and not abused by whatever access the Talasco property is given for parking, which is what he appears to have petitioned the change of address for on his property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Muscallo. Would anyone else like to address the board? Anyone else at all? All right. If not, we will conclude the public comment session at this time.
Thank you. We appreciate those speakers for coming forward. We don't respond to citizen comment typically, but I would ask the board, if you believe it's appropriate, that we ask the town attorney and the staff to update us on the issues that speakers raised today at their earliest convenience, and see if we can find a constructive way forward on some of these issues that were raised.
I have some questions I'm going to ask under my agenda about our staff and the attorney that were raised.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the adoption or the approval of the consent agenda. You see the items that are listed there, and a motion would be in order.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda are reports and recommendations from the Planning Board and the Planning and Development Director.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Happy to provide you an update on the Focus UDO project. The town hosted a community meeting for the draft UDO on April the 11th. We didn't receive any additional public comment at that time. We also provided an update to the Planning Board at their April 16th meeting. We did discuss with the Planning Board having an adoption and an effective date. The Planning Board was in support of that. There was no additional discussion about that item. We are still accepting public comment through this Friday, May the 3rd. That can be emailed in to myself at holly.white@nagsheadnc.gov. We attached an agenda for the completion of the project at the bottom of the memo. We intend on providing a draft copy to the board, the planning board, and the technical committee this Friday, May the 3rd. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Holly,
Renee?
how many people came to your public comment session?
There were no members of the public other than those people who were involved with the project already, some members of the board, the technical committee, and staff.
Thank you.
Yes, Webb.
The one thing I want to make sure is that when the board receives the UDO, that is a completed document. I hope we don't get a UDO that is not completed. And the way I read this, and explain to me if I'm wrong, but it says you plan to give us a completed document on May 3rd, but then down later, you start talking about all these other things you're going to be doing to the UDO. And I can't match that in my head, that why don't we get a completed document? Why are we going to be, like it says, incorporate technical committee and board feedback, incorporate recent text amendments, finalize and insert diagrams? Why aren't all those going to be in a completed document?
They will. They are.
They will be, all
Yes.
that'll be done by
Yes.
Friday.
I'm just
Okay,
noting
because
here
it says
that,
ongoing, it doesn't say completed and included.
well, it will be completed and included when you receive the copy for the board. All those items will have been addressed at that point. And so
Okay.
the only thing remaining after May the 3rd would be anything that would be addressed through any of these additional meetings. So if the planning board has recommendations, we would bring those forward. If the board holds a workshop and there are additional comments and feedback, that would have to be included after the fact. But everything that we've done to this point will be included in the document you receive on Friday.
So as far as you're concerned, staff has completed the document and we'll get on Friday.
Yes.
Then it's up to us to change it if we so choose.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Renee.
Holly, the focus part of this plan, has it gone to CAMA?
Yes, it has gone to CAMA.
Has CAMA approved it?
No, because there was a consistency check that had to be done by staff initially. We have received comments back from staff at DCM. We have to now respond back to them addressing all of their comments before it can be sent to CRC for approval, and before it can go into the 90-day period for review by state agencies. So we are trying to address their comments.
And what's your timeline for getting that back so it can enter the 90-day time period?
As soon as we possibly can.
Do you have a date?
I would be, okay, by the end of, thank you, by the end of May.
Okay. All right, so by the end of May, everything should be answered to CAMA, and then it can enter the 90-day. Unless they have further questions.
Correct.
I would hope they don't have any further questions. I do not anticipate that they will hold up this process this time like they did the last time.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
I don't think that's going to be acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Good. Glad to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is an update on the stormwater projects. David?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Board of Commissioners. Just like to briefly give the board an update on the construction projects of the three stormwater drainage infrastructure improvements here within the town of Nags Head. The first project is project area number 1, which is the upstream improvements to the Red Drum Ocean Outfall. That project is about 90% complete right now. There are some punch list items that still need to be addressed, but that system is fully operational and has proven to work pretty well over the recent storm events that we've had. Project area number 2, which is the Vista Colony subdivision and Nags Head Acres project. That construction is underway. The contractor has been working on the southeast portion of that project with a horizontal directional drill which connects the southeast corner of Westbridge Lane to Meekins Avenue. That was conducted yesterday, and the contractor is also working back on the discharge end there by the nursing home, and they hope to complete that pipe connection this week. And then from there, they will be going in the neighborhood and then connecting up those two sections from the upstream and the downstream in between the neighborhood. Also, the contractor is working here within the village of Nags Head between Mall Drive and Epstein Street. They are approximately 50 to 60% complete with that work, and will be continuing to make progress over the course of the next several weeks to complete that area of construction. So does the board have any questions about that construction progress?
I have a question about the project at Red Drum, the stone weir that's in the canal just ahead of the new box culvert that was installed. Is that a permanent? That's not a permanent fixture, is it?
No, that has been removed. There was a check dam that was installed, and that was for sedimentation and erosion control. So that was removed last Friday, and then that has been used for stabilization around that head wall structure.
Okay. And the directional boring work that was done in Nags Head Acres, the pipe is exposed at the curve. Which direction did they go with that bore? Did they go west from that point, or did they go to the next neighborhood with that bore?
They went to the south, so they went along Mr. Baylog's property, and it comes up on the north side of Meekins Avenue.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members?
With that boring, do you expect any tree loss? Because where the survey stakes are in that neighborhood, there's a lot of trees that are in the survey line.
Right. So the plans noted that the force main would be located next to the right-of-way line, and the stakes reflect that on the ground. We do have the flexibility to move that force main closer to the road in order to minimize impacts, and we're also investigating changing the construction method from open trench cut to horizontal directional drill to further reduce impacts.
So you don't figure any of those pine trees between Baylog's house and Drummond's house are gonna die due to root?
No, just because the bore is going to go beneath that root structure, approximately 6 feet in the ground. And so that's something that we worked with the contractor on to ensure that it wouldn't impact the trees. And as far as the installation goes, there was some minimal clearing that was required on Mr. Baylog's property, but there was no tree removal required.
Okay, you just don't want to see a tree fall due to us boring that out.
Yeah.
Right. The alignment was adjusted to try to minimize impacts to the tree roots. So we've done everything that we could to try to reduce or minimize that.
All right, thank you.
And we did get an easement for that. Did we assume any liability during that easement?
That there were easements that were required from Mr. Baylog and Mr. Palmer in order to install those two sections of pipe, yes.
Along with ongoing maintenance agreements for those easements?
It's a perpetual easement.
Yes, ma'am.
Just curious about our liability.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
All right, and one other item I wanted to update the board with. As we had our CIP and budget workshops, we talked about future construction projects, two of those being project area number 12 and number 13 along South Old Oregon Inlet Road. Staff has had a meeting with North Carolina Department of Transportation to talk about potential cost share agreements for those two projects. And we received word earlier this week that DOT would be willing to do a cost share on those two projects up to $100,000.
Thank you. Questions, Renee or Webb? Susie or Webb? Okay, thank you, David.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, we have the board has tentatively scheduled a budget workshop for May 15th, which would be your normal mid-month meeting. At that time, we may need to convene this meeting in a way that you may be able to make some decisions about stormwater and funding going forward with the expense of the projects in South Nags Head. I think there's still, we might be able to make some decisions to make sure we keep these projects going forward. Is that fair to say?
That is correct. As it stands right now, we have gotten with our engineering consultant to look at 3 other projects. That's project area number 4, Wrightsville Avenue, project area number 9, which is Nags Head Pond, Carolyn Circle, and then project area number 10, which is Barracuda in the proximity of Kipper Court. And so we are trying to finalize a proposal with them to try to get an overall fee estimate of what that work is going to take with design and construction, and how these other 2 projects will coincide with that work.
Yes.
May I make a comment that as our consultant engineer, whatever, works, that at the last meeting, they presented us, one of the solutions was to use one of our beach accesses,
Yes, ma'am.
which theoretically wasn't possible because of lot coverage. I hope we don't pay them to design stuff that, when it comes to us, can't be done because of our ordinances.
Correct.
If we're going to design stuff, that they present solutions that can be done and not wasting our money on things that cannot be done.
Yes, ma'am.
Understood.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
There was a presentation at the North Carolina Beaches, Inlets, and Waterways Conference over the last couple of days about the infiltration system similar to the one that is under consideration at Bonnet Street. That one has been bid. It has not yet been built. And it did essentially come in on the, I believe, on the engineer's budget, pretty close to it. And so it would be interesting to observe how that one progresses while we consider this one ourselves. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is consideration of an amendment to the site plan by Jim Cap Development to include addition of a concrete bulkhead.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners.
Morning.
As mentioned, I'm before you this morning to discuss a site plan amendment that's being requested by Jim Cap Development for the property that's located at 6813 South Croatan Highway. This is the Sherwin-Williams location. So back on April 4th, 2018, the Planning Board and the Board of Commissioners approved a site plan request for the construction of this property. At that time, there was no indication of any need for a wall on the north side of this property. But as staff was doing their final inspections on April 1st, 2019, we had various departments out there at the same time. As we were doing this, we noticed, I'll try to blow this plan up for you. We noticed that an approximately 2-foot-high concrete retaining wall had been constructed in this location along the northern property boundary. Again, that had not been reviewed and approved by Planning Board or the Board of Commissioners, and it had not been brought to staff's attention prior to being constructed. It was just noticed once it had been installed. So based upon that, and staff consultation, our planning director determined that this was a major deviation to the approved site plan, and as such, it was required to come back through the Planning Board and the Board of Commissioners for their review and consideration. I've included a note in your package. We do have some regulation on the use of retaining walls for residential structures, but that same regulation does not apply to commercial structures. So the use of a retaining wall for a commercial structure, it is allowed. I included a brief timeline of events related to this property, dating back to April 4th, where the Board of Commissioners approved the plan. June 21st, 2018, we had the issuance of permits. In December of 2018, we had a temporary CO that was issued for approximately 30 days. That temporary CO was extended another 30 days in mid-January, and again in late February. We had an extension of the temporary CO. Our staff, our deputy town manager, planning director, chief building inspector, and town engineer met with the contractor on site and discussed what the process was moving forward, any punch list items, and the need to come back to staff should there be a deviation. That meeting was on March 1st, and again, we discovered the deviation on April 1st. The letter that was provided to the developer, GemCap Development, as well as IB Builders, who's the contractor, that was drafted and provided on April 3rd. Since then, conversations with the contractor, IB Builders, they've indicated that the need for the retaining wall came about due to conflicts with some underground utilities, that they undertook the work at that time, noting that they did not bring it to staff's attention prior to construction. Staff did ask that the developer go back, have the engineer of record, Coastal Engineering, review the construction of the retaining wall and go ahead and provide the seal for that. They have done that, and that's included in your package. There were a few other minor things, site work that needs to be taken care of, some seeding and stabilization, ensuring some of the landscaping that's provided thrives. But the major deviation was this 2-foot retaining wall. So the developer, I believe we do have a representative from IB Builders here today, BJ DePietro, who could answer any questions that you may have, but that's why we're before you today, is this was deemed to be a major deviation from the approved plan. With that in mind, staff does recommend approval of the site plan amendment, and when the planning board reviewed this at their April 16th meeting, they also recommended approval of the site plan amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and as I said, we do have a representative from IB Builders in the audience.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Sears?
For the builder.
Okay. How about for Kelly first? Commissioner Cahoon?
During this building process, a stop work order was not issued for any of this until the proper authorizations could be gotten?
A stop work order was not issued. I'm not familiar with when the retaining wall went in, but between the March 1st and April 1st meeting, that wall did not exist. So staff's first indication of the wall was when we went on site, the morning of April 1st.
There's a 5-foot setback from the line, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you point out to me where everything appears on this site plan, the 5-foot setback? And I'm particularly interested in the north side.
The northern boundary in the area of the parking lot? Or just-
Yes, well, all the way down, particularly in that northern property line. There's some construction, there's some, I'm gathering that the arrow that goes right there, that takes it to the property line, EOP?
Yes, that is the property line, and this, it's very hard to see, but there's this dashed line that's indicating the 5-foot structure setback. So the 5-foot setback is to the building.
Okay, so in that 5-foot setback, there's supposed to be, that's supposed to take care of their drainage and not let it go on other people's property.
Yes, ma'am.
There's no swale there. It's flat. And for the life of me, I'm not an engineer. I just observe things as they go. And looking at this property, not even the retaining wall, this is what it looked like on Friday, is all their rock underneath the building is eroding down, and their storm water is flowing onto the adjacent northern property. Their rocks are flowing down, that's covering up their vegetation. So, not trying to give you a hard time, Kelly, but I have, for the life of me, how we allow a commercial property to flood the next door neighbor, and they're in here asking for a site plan amendment.
And David Ryan, the town engineer, might be able to speak to this more so than I can, but I believe as far as the stormwater, the approved stormwater management for the northern side, it was being, I understand.
I mean, I'd be glad to share it, but that's what it looked like. And it's running down onto the property. Belongs to the tourism board.
I think this is probably the first time we've heard of the issue, but we can look into it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Not you, but I took the manager out there under construction and talked about the stormwater. So this is not the first time. You're new, but I took the manager out there as we talked about stormwater during the construction of it. And it's still appearing as to what's going on. And I can't, for the life of me, vote for something as an amendment when it's not even meeting our current ordinance, which is the 3-to-1 slope, is that correct? 3-to-1 slope?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's not supposed to be running all over everybody else's property.
I don't disagree. I think this is something, they have an entire punch list of items that they need to address. And this, we can add to this list if it's something we need to
They've got
investigate.
their vegetation in, but they don't have a swale to hold their stormwater. And I just don't understand if you've got a wall and you've got sloping gravel that's already eroding from underneath their building, running down into their vegetation, that any stormwater is going to be retained on their site in that area.
We can confirm that they've built the plan per their approved stormwater plan, but if we need to verify that they need to be held to a different standard. If they're not complying with the requirements, we can confirm that.
I have a question for our attorney. Can we require a bond to prevent them from dumping their stormwater onto adjacent property?
If you approve anything as an amendment to the plan, yes.
All right, thank you.
So, Michael, a little history with this has changed at the contractor's will a couple of times.
Yes.
With staff finding out about things afterwards, and this has been amended a couple of times. And that's the situation that's put us in this particular situation.
Yes, sir. It's my understanding that at least the two previous amendments were communicated to staff prior to being made. Can't confirm that, but that's what I was made to understand, and that in this case with the retaining wall, as Kelly indicated, we had a meeting with the contractor. I attended that meeting. I thought we were very clear in terms of what expectations we had to get to a final certificate of compliance and CO. And then I think we were all surprised when we went out there to do an inspection with the expiration of the TCO or TCC that this wall had been installed. So I think, it doesn't necessarily resolve this issue, but I think, I've communicated to staff that they, not that they're not diligent, but they be more diligent in seeing and spotting deviations from plans, and that we communicate that to contractors and property owners at the time of permit issuance and continuing throughout the projects, so we don't find ourselves in this predicament.
Commissioner Walters.
Yeah, there have been concerns about this project from the beginning. I know that board members have expressed, even when the foundation was going in, there was a huge amount of fill placed on that property, and it was our understanding that that fill was going inside the foundation walls. Perhaps that did occur, but the site is extremely elevated compared to the one beside it. While that may be appropriate, it's disappointing when one of the biggest issues we face as a community and also as taxpayers and financially is stormwater, and not wanting to damage property owners, anywhere around us. And that continues to occur, apparently, no matter how much we have expressed and attempted to resolve that matter. So I'm not sure how we're going to resolve this today, but I'm disappointed that we're here. That's all. I'm just disappointed that we've come to this, because something happened in the good faith process and in understanding our ordinances and what's expected. So.
Thank you. Commissioner.
I have two questions. The first question is, does the proposed change have any effect on any of the landscaping ordinance or buffering ordinance and requirements that are on site?
No, sir. The landscaping and buffering was not altered based upon this deviation.
Okay. And then the second question is, if staff considered this a major issue, how did staff make its decision to issue a certificate of occupancy before these things were brought to our attention?
So technically, no certificate of occupancy has been issued. A temporary certificate of compliance has been issued, and that was originally issued back in December. And then there were subsequent extensions of that. And the most recent extension was issued following staff becoming aware of the issue of the installation of the wall. And that extension was issued, in the letter that was issued that's in your package was issued with the guidance of the Town Attorney Gallup. Basically, I believe because of the standing temporary certificate of compliance in the manner that that had been issued, I think we received guidance that we should more officially convey what outstanding items there were, so that if we found ourselves at the end of that period for that temporary certificate of compliance, that we could perhaps look to cease occupancy of the business if they hadn't complied with all of the requirements.
Then, Mr. Mayor, I probably have follow-up questions then. Does certificate of compliance equate to a certificate of occupancy?
No.
And where in our ordinance does certificate of compliance have anything to do with certificate of occupancy?
Sure, it's from the building code. So a certificate of compliance is a preliminary step to a certificate of occupancy.
So they don't have a certificate of occupancy yet?
No, sir.
So-
But occupancy is allowed by the issuance of a temporary certificate of compliance under the building code.
So can we require or can we demand that part of that building not be occupied?
Not.
I think we're currently going through the steps to hopefully bring the site into compliance. And we have, I believe, an expiration on the current temporary certificate of compliance of the end of May 30th. And at that time and prior to that time, if we see that the site's not in compliance, I think we'll coordinate with the town attorney to determine what our next steps might be.
Okay. Can you just, from my education, cite to me where certificate of compliance is something that we have determined allows occupancy?
I can't right now, but I'm happy to go back and pull the citation out of the building code. Yes,
Because
sir.
if I'm not mistaken, that would be a change that was made at some date between '05 and now. Because it was, a certificate of compliance did not give occupancy at one point in time.
Very good. I'm happy to provide the citation.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question that I think probably should go to our town engineer.
Yes, sir.
David, on the, I have less concern about the retaining wall. Yes, I have a concern that that's a change, and probably a necessary one, given the grades on the site. My concern is on the north side of the building where they have used the riprap to attempt to hold the slope there, and where Commissioner Cahoon's photograph shows the sand eroding basically out from under that gravel and spilling over onto the adjacent site. Is that a solution? Is that a problem on that north side that probably requires additional engineering on the part of the applicant to resolve that? Or can that be done just by construction and additional work in that area with what's already shown on the site plan? Or do we think that we need to ask them to go back and take another look at that, since we're in this situation of looking at the site plan again, to give that a better solution?
Yes, I think we need to go back and take a look at that. When this was originally proposed to the town, we had the engineer of record go back and do an engineer design on that slope in accordance with the North Carolina Sedimentation and Erosion Control Pollution Act, to ensure that what they proposed was in accordance with general practices. We received that information. Now, have we been out there to do a follow-up review to ensure that that has been installed in accordance with that plan? We have not. So that's something we need to revisit.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to make a motion that we table this item until our next meeting to give staff time to go out there and make sure that they've met the erosion and sedimentation control, and that they bring back a solution as to how they're not going to flood the neighbor's property.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on that?
The motion to table is non-discussable.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can we just,
Non-discussable.
All right. Yes, all right.
Unless you need clarification on the effect of the motion.
That's what I was trying to offer.
Yeah.
So is there a question on clarification of the motion? Because the motion to table is
Table.
to give staff time to look at the erosion issues and to confirm that it's properly installed and that there will not be negative effect essentially on the adjacent property owner.
Yeah, because once we approve something, I mean, this, I can't debate this, so.
Okay, all right, thank you. So we have a motion. I think we're clear on the effect of the motion, and we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is old business items tabled from the previous meeting, the presentation of a proposed zoning ordinance text amendment pertaining to ADUs.
Thank you. Returning to you with a draft of an ordinance addressing accessory dwelling units within the zoning ordinance. The board at their April 3rd meeting voted 3-2 in favor of a motion directing staff to prepare this draft ordinance and present it to the planning board at their April meeting and return to the commissioners for this meeting. Staff presented a draft ordinance to the planning board on April 16th. The board discussed several aspects of the draft ordinance and the issues in terms of dealing with accessory dwelling units within the town, and did make a motion to defer issuing a recommendation on the draft ordinance until the board has had a further opportunity to discuss the proposal further. Staff has recommended today that the board defer any action on the draft ordinance until the planning board has reviewed the matter further and provided a recommendation. We would suggest that you discuss the various considerations and specific items addressed and provide any feedback that you wish for the staff as well as the planning board. I'm happy to go through the different specific items, and I went through these at the last meeting, but perhaps we have a little bit more detail at this time. With respect to minimum lot size in terms of accessory dwelling units, we had not previously recommended and are not recommending under the draft a minimum lot size requirements, but we do recognize that members of this body did suggest that either lots less than 16,000 square feet or non-conforming lots be precluded from being allowed to have ADUs, accessory dwelling units. We did not provide this information. We did not have this information available for the planning board, but we did include in your memo a breakdown of the number of non-conforming lots and conforming lots and the number of lots less than 16,000 and equal to or greater than 16,000 square feet.
Excuse me,
Yes,
because
sir.
this is where I had some misunderstanding, so I'd maybe like for you to explain that more
Sure.
in a term I can understand it.
Yes, sir.
So if you're in a 15,000 square foot zoning district, and if you have 14,500 square feet, can you or can you not have an accessory dwelling unit?
Under the draft ordinance, you can, but I believe it was your suggestion that that non-conforming lots less than the minimum area, be precluded from being allowed in an ADU. So
I know that was my suggestion, but is that in here or not in here?
It's not in the draft ordinance, but we wanted to provide the information on what that would look like if we were to restrict it from those lots, how many lots that would eliminate from being allowed in ADU.
Okay, so you're still recommending allowing ADUs on any lot of record?
With limits on the zoning district, yes.
Well, yeah,
yes.
but I mean, if they meet, the lot size makes no difference, even if it doesn't meet the lot of record size?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because I think generally, I believe it's less than 10% of the lots that would be eligible under either scenario. And I don't know if that presents some uniformity issue in terms of whether or not it's a consistent allowance. It's a significant minority of the number of lots either in terms of the conforming lots or those greater than 16,000 square feet, which would be allowed ADUs, and that may or may not be a consideration for this board. In terms of maximum unit size, staff had recommended a maximum size of 800 square feet. The technical committee and members of the Board of Commissioners, I believe, indicated their support for a maximum of 600 square feet, and members of the planning board were also supportive of limiting to 600 square feet versus 800 square feet. Height limits, staff and the technical committee have suggested limiting the height of ADUs, those being in detached accessory structures, to 1.5 stories. The draft ordinance contains the provision that would address that and limit the height of those. Location of units on lots. What the draft ordinance proposes, currently there is an accessory structure setback of 5 feet. What we would propose is that if that accessory structure contained an ADU, that it meet a minimum setback of 10 feet. So the setback would increase from 5 to 10 for that detached structure. If there are, and that would be up until the midpoint. So if that accessory structure was in front of the midpoint, then it would need to meet the setback of the principal structure. And in any case, if it's an attached ADU, so if the ADU is part of the principal structure, it would meet the principal structure setbacks regardless. Adequacy of septic, this may be a redundant provision, but we did want to make sure that proper approvals were being granted by the health department. And I think you've seen maybe in the memo where it talks about some of the experiences of other communities that the ability to secure that approval may limit someone's ability to have an ADU. So there are several, whether it's our provisions or limitations imposed by the health department, there are several aspects of this that would preclude somebody or maybe limit their ability to have an accessory dwelling unit. Utility service, we are suggesting that ADUs share the same electrical and water meters as the principal dwelling, that there not be separate meters. Parking requirements, we clarified this provision. I think this was a point of discussion at the last meeting. The intent was not to reduce the required parking, but we've clarified that the bedrooms in an ADU count towards the required parking for the dwelling. So if there's a 6-bedroom house, we don't separate out the 4 bedrooms that are in the principal and the 2 bedrooms that are in the ADU to determine parking. We say it's a 6-bedroom house. They're providing -2, so they provide 4 parking spaces, but then we require 1 additional space for the ADU, so they're required to provide 5 parking spaces. Allowable locations. This was certainly a point of discussion at the last meeting, and what we've developed here is a allowance where ADUs are by right in the R3, C2, and C4 zoning districts, and allowed only with the conditional use permit in the R1, R2, CR, C1, SPD 20, and SED 80 districts. And for the conditional use permit, in addition to those standards for conditional use permits that are under section 48.525, we've added 3 new standards by which the planning board and the board of commissioners would consider when they were reviewing conditional use permits for ADUs. In terms of length of stay, we've not made any reference to whether ADU units would be rented or leased, but we have indicated that the units would need to be occupied for greater than 30 days. Density, I know this was a point of discussion as well. I'm not necessarily going to read this entire section, but I think we certainly believe that density can be viewed differently. There's certainly density of housing units. There's certainly density related to mass in the building scale, and there's perhaps density related to number of persons per area. Because of other limitations, namely septic limitations, just sheer limitations on the number of people that could realistically occupy a building, we don't necessarily feel as though creating an ADU, which won't allow someone to increase the building mass that they could already construct a single-family home at, we don't believe it would necessarily allow for more people to occupy that dwelling than could reasonably otherwise occupy that dwelling. But we also know that that there are certain circumstances in the community that would maybe be contrary to that belief. So I think it's a longer conversation, and I think that probably echoes the planning board's recommendation and thereby staff's recommendation that this warrants some more consideration and discussion. I think, again, I referenced some feedback that we received from Dare, Duck, Kitty Hawk, and Manio. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Mike?
No questions.
Don't you ever start on the other end?
I don't. I'll keep something here that I can flip back and forth, so I can start on both ends from now on, equally.
One of the things that I heard at our last meeting from, and I believe it was during public comment, was about neighborhoods that do not allow accessory dwellings. I'm a firm believer that while we don't enforce covenants, that I think we should respect covenants, and perhaps a statement somewhere in this language that neighborhoods that do not prohibit this will not be issued permits for ADUs.
Neighborhoods that do prohibit this would not be issued.
Right. Neighborhoods that have covenants that prohibit this development would not be issued permits by the town. I don't know if that's legal according to our attorney, but it's one way that we have of offering town support to respect those documents.
I'm going to give it some more thought. I'm having a hard time coming up with any reason why you can't do that, but I can't say with certainty that you can. I mean, as a policy consideration, I certainly understand the idea, but I want to look into that, see if there's any reason why you could not impose that condition or restriction.
Okay, thank you. That's, I know we're not allowed to regulate ownership, and I know we talked about that, but I know in one section down in South Nags Head, where each individual unit was condoed, the property stayed in, that's what I say, Dr. Forbes is dead. She took her cottage court that she had and sold every unit but kept the property. And the owners, the people own the houses. Is there anything that, there's nothing we can do to stop this, I don't believe.
Yeah, I think it warrants some discussion. It's not a subdivision to create a condo document and have that recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Whether we can preclude that, I'm not certain.
I mean, I know you've said one electric meter, but there are ways around that as well, but that was just a curiosity question as to how that would work. And right now, I'm still mulling it over, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Walters.
First, I'd like to thank you and staff for your work on this and for working with the planning board. I did read all of the minutes, the comments that were made at the planning board by Mrs. Fuller and Mr. Muller. And I take those to heart. We asked the planning board to take a look at this. They have not made a recommendation. I think some statements were made today that are perhaps a misunderstanding. We did not ask for an ordinance to be brought forward simply for workforce housing. We asked for an ordinance to be brought forward that addresses a multitude of needs, whether it's a year-round housing need, whether it's an aging-in-place need, whether it's a caregiver need, whether it's a, your child comes home from a divorce with their grandkid and needs a place to live need. It's a multitude of needs that ADUs can provide a resolution to. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. People have different needs, and we already know that granny pods are legal across the state on any property. So there are many places in Nags Head that where we have illegally constructed duplexes. They have been here since I moved here in 1983 and continue to flourish for quite a while. We've done nothing to address those, and it seems that this is an opportunity to address a need, make it legal, and not make it non-conforming. I looked at the table on non-conforming lots, and we have 81% of our lots in Nags Head are non-conforming. Ironically, 81% of those are also less than 16,000 square feet. So at some point, we need to work toward not making everything in our town non-conforming. It's probably a fair bet that most every one of us lives on a non-conforming lot in one way or another. Also, another issue that I brought up at the retreat, it is not in the retreat minutes, is that our Nags Head residences, some of them are really struggling. We have 102 students in Nags Head that are on free and reduced lunch. 102. Out of a total of 354 students that live in Nags Head and attend Dare County schools, 29% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. There's a need for affordable housing one way or another. There's a need for families to be able to make ends meet, because if we're not caring for all of our citizens, then I don't think we're caring. That's just me personally. Other issues, other towns, Duck, Manio, Kitty Hawk, and Dare have managed to resolve this issue. I believe we can too, with the help of the planning board. We say we want to support small local businesses. Well, their employees need a place to live. You know, whether it's year-round or whether it's seasonal. So again, I just want to add those comments, and I do thank you for the work that's been done. I have personally received an email from a citizen on my personal email. I immediately forwarded that to the entire board and staff. I am hopeful that during this process, we will allow the planning board to do their work, that we will allow the attorney to answer any legal questions that they have, either in writing or in person. And I would like to ask that we consider having all planning board members that are receiving personal emails on this matter, that those be sent to the town as a matter of record, not only on this matter, but on any matters relating to the town. I think it's a problem that there's outside communications that really are a matter of public record. So I would like for us to continue this process in an open and transparent way, have our attorney help the staff and the planning board understand the legalities of what we can and cannot do, and work forward. Usually when we all work together, we come up with great solutions. So some of those were mentioned earlier today. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fuller.
I guess, first of all, and just to address Commissioner Walters first, I think you may have thought that we clearly talked about workforce housing, year-round housing, additional dwelling units. I don't think the board gave that direction to planning staff. I think what planning staff, the planning board got was, we want you to look at this ordinance, and it doesn't make any difference because it's going to come back to the board at the next meeting. And I would like for this board, if we so choose, to clearly articulate what we're trying to do. The point, I think, that anybody's been through any institute of government school, always one of the first things you learn is you focus on your, you focus on your interest, not your process. I mean, not your result. I mean,
Position.
your position. And I think we've established a position, which is we want accessory dwelling units, but we've never clearly articulated our position, which is, I'm not sure what it is yet, because I don't know if I have a position yet. I heard you might today, okay, let me just address density. I understand how you're looking at density. I think that's clearly a way and in an appropriate way. I totally disagree with that as the appropriate way, and you know that I have a difference of opinion, but I certainly respect how y'all have addressed it and think that if everybody else is fine with it, I just got to get over it. So with that being said, there are a couple of other things. I thought I heard you say today, and I went and checked, but I thought I heard you today say that you put in the ordinance 600 square feet maximum. I know the planning board wanted 600. I know some other people wanted 600. The ordinance is clear that it's 800.
Yes, sir. In the draft, it was 800. Feedback we heard at the last meeting that members here were in favor of 600. We heard that same feedback from the planning board. We didn't change this version from what was presented to the planning board. That's not to say we wouldn't. That's not to say we shouldn't, but we also thought that it was probably best for this conversation, for this board to be presented with the same ordinance that was discussed by the planning board. So we haven't made a change at this time.
Okay, but yet a number of policy groups have said 600.
Correct. Yes,
Y'all are
sir.
still at 800.
I couldn't.
From some reason, y'all are at 800.
I would tell you, given the feedback that we've heard, I think it's valid to consider reducing that from 800.
Okay.
I think the draft, what I'm trying to say is the draft that's before you is not necessarily a recommendation ignoring what we heard from the commissioners of the planning board, but it was more to make sure that you and the planning board were discussing the same document at this time. And I think there are certain things that we can continue to be informed on that are in the draft that may change.
Now, in what you're, okay, maybe let me go back to what I understand the beginning was, which was focus. The focus group that met, that was basically the policy group, they discussed workforce housing as a need on the beach road, specifically for businesses, small businesses on the beach road, and I think that could extend back a little bit to the bypass, but as an area where we may want to consider accessory dwelling units. They also discussed they didn't want to change neighborhoods on the west side. That the main thing about the west side neighborhoods was the open space, the less density, et cetera, et cetera. So it went from that group to the technical group, which was supposed to write the ordinance. And in general, the first time they wrote the ordinance, it pretty much paralleled that. So I don't understand how we migrated from what that focus group at the policy level wanted as a value, which is the only guidance I've seen so far, through the technical group to a staff draft that's clearly different than what the policy group came up with. And I'd like somebody to explain how that transition occurred, where it went from what that group wanted to where we are today. I mean, I'd like it probably in a memo form, like what happened.
Yes, sir. I can't speak to much of that, as you know, but all I can tell you is that the current draft presents a host of options in terms of the zoning districts in which ADUs would be allowed. I don't think we're necessarily beholden to any of those districts in terms of our recommendation, especially if the commissioners or the planning board feel like ADUs should not be allowed in one district versus another. But I think the issue that I think we're considering, that I think the boards are considering, as staff, I would be hesitant to allow ADUs along the beach road without maybe a more conservative approach, because I worry that the unintended consequences, if we cannot address occupancy, if we cannot address ownership, may lead to unintended consequences. May not, if we intend for this to solve affordable housing issues, to address workforce housing issues, I'm not certain that doing it in a less restrictive way along the beach road is an outcome, would produce the outcomes that we hoped for and intended. I think with respect to allowing them within West Side neighborhoods, perhaps with a conditional use permit, I think many communities look at these as a less obtrusive way to allow for more affordable housing or more housing units, because you're not necessarily allowing for someone to construct anything larger than they otherwise would. But that being said, if this board, if the planning board believes that they shouldn't be allowed, period, conditional use permit or no, I think that that's perfectly fair. I don't think I think we're presenting you with options. And I think, you know, maybe we're hoping to find a middle road for the boards to consider, where a conditional use permit may be something that allows for the boards to find an opportunity to protect in certain circumstances that an ADU at a particular property was not meeting all of the standards because of this, and that therefore it wasn't warranted to get that, to be issued that permit. But I completely respect if the board doesn't agree that they should be allowed in certain districts.
The next, it's at least apparent to me from the reading that you exempted what we refer to as the village. So you've already made a value decision that one neighborhood does not need to be included. And I applaud that, because that's a West Side neighborhood that I think does need to be protected. But why would you only exempt one neighborhood and not other neighborhoods?
So I think it goes maybe to Commissioner Cahoon's comments earlier with respect to HOAs and other associations. So the village is unique, where it is a zoning district and a HOA unto itself. So it's very easy for us to exclude it from that zoning district, and thereby respect what I believe, what I understand is that they don't have any intention of allowing ADUs within their HOA, under their HOA guidelines, versus other HOAs are not covered by singular zoning districts. So it's very difficult for us to exclude individual neighborhoods where they may be in districts that multiple neighborhoods are within. I think, I mean, just coming and being here for a month and a half, I think there is a need to look at different zoning districts for different areas of town. I don't know that the R2 district should cover some of the West Side neighborhoods in South Nags Head. I think there are different characteristics of those areas that may warrant some consideration of a different district and perhaps the different treatment of ADUs. But that's something that I think could be explored as we discuss it with the planning board.
Okay. And so you're well aware that a lot of the village is not under the guidance of the HOA?
No, sir.
You're not aware of that?
No, sir. But I'm happy to learn.
Okay. So how are you going to address future parts? Like, for instance, we've encouraged, I guess, what we call mixed use, where you have commercial downstairs and accessory dwelling units upstairs.
Yes, sir.
Which we've encouraged in the village. So are you saying that we're still going to encourage that, or that now they can't do that anymore?
No, sir. That's my understanding that that's a different type of use versus an ADU. So I think we don't preclude someone having a mixed use, residential and commercial, in certain districts, and that's not what we're addressing under this ordinance.
So if you have a commercial and 4 apartments, a commercial business with 4 apartments, one is, you're saying those aren't accessory dwelling units to the principal use?
Not under this ordinance. They're not addressed under this ordinance. I'd have to go back and give you a more educated answer to your question, but no, I believe those are addressed under mixed use provisions. These are specifically accessory dwellings to single-family dwellings.
Okay. The next thing that I have is you're allowing principal structures to be allowed for weekly rentals in neighborhoods, but you require, this is proposed, of course, but you're proposing that accessory dwelling units can go up to 30 days when you allow primary structures to be a week rental and the secondary structure can be 30 days.
It's something we discussed, whether or not both the principal and the accessory dwelling unit should be limited to being occupied or being precluded from being occupied for less than 30 days. I think at this time, you know, what we've suggested is that the ADU would be the only limited unit in terms of occupancy. Whether the board wants us to look at, you know, where you have an ADU, limiting the principal dwelling and the ADU to occupancy greater than 30 days, we can certainly discuss it with the town attorney.
Okay, I mean, it gets twisted with me because you have single-family homes that are there occupied by the week, yet you can have an accessory dwelling unit that's there for 30 days.
Yeah, and I think the thing that staff has talked about, or at least has been conveyed to me, and I think it was discussions that had occurred prior to me starting with the town, is that, especially maybe on the beach road, perhaps there would be instances of people that owned a property that it's a singular house that they rented, that perhaps they might like to create an ADU that would allow them to visit and enjoy their property while the house was also being used as a rental. And perhaps that is something that that we could allow for in the ordinance, but
Which goes on all the time right now anyway.
it may if there are 2 units, sure, yes.
And mostly what happens is, mostly they're unheated or not heated and cool.
Sure.
And so they move from the big house to the other, but they still rent the house.
Yes, sir.
To cover their costs. But I just said enough. I think the planning board is where planning should be done. I'm glad and I appreciate the fact that staff recommended sending it back to the planning board. I think there are a lot of things out there that need to be looked at. I, for one, as a board member, would like to give very clear direction to staff on what we're trying to accomplish. I think if we try to accomplish everything in one fatal swoop, this will take at least a year to develop something. And I'd rather, and I thought we, as a board, had agreed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, that what we needed to do was kind of take a bite of the elephant, and that our primary goal was to start with seasonal workforce housing as an issue we'd like to try to work on first. Now, if I'm wrong, please correct me.
I'm sorry.
I don't remember that. That wasn't the direction we provided to the planning staff when we had consensus, just to ask them to draft an ordinance regarding, they addressed the issues that we had in there. But I'm just saying, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying I don't remember that.
And I do want us to, since we have this agenda item in front of us and this discussion, clearly, I attended the planning board meeting. There were significant questions that were raised there, which are part of why staff has made this recommendation, that they need additional consideration. The town attorney has issues that need to be addressed, I think, both from that meeting and issues that were raised in today's meeting. And we've given additional input today, again, on accessory dwelling units that needs to be considered by the planning board. So the issues before us, I think, are two, is to have a consensus that this goes back to that we accept that recommendation and that this go back to the planning board. The second is whether we can or should set a public hearing at this point, given the work that the planning board needs to do. And so I guess I would try to get a sense first of, is there consensus? Yes, that we're accepting the planning board's recommendation that this be sent back to the or the planning staff's recommendation that this be sent back to the planning board for additional work.
That is consensus. I do want to say one thing, though. I think when we're looking at this, the who, what, why, where we're going to put all this, I think you also need to look at the fact that a lot of our ordinances restrict us one way or another. And the new repair area for 4 bedrooms is going to restrict ADUs. The lot coverage is going to restrict ADUs. 16,000 square feet is going to restrict ADUs. And we have that same problem with multifamily housing, townhouses. Currently, they're impossible to find a location for. I would like the planning department to tell us what would be more beneficial for us overall as a community to adjust those ordinances with multifamily and townhouses so that maybe those structures could be built in certain zoning in certain areas, or would an ADU be more beneficial long-term? Not just the immediate issues. I mean, we have an immediate issue, and affordability is a word that is loosely thrown around, but there's more to it than just that. We need to bring other jobs here besides our seasonal jobs so that affordability is obtainable. So I would like the broader spectrum looked at, because right now with our ordinances crossing back and forth with each other, there's not much of an allowance in any of those areas.
Thank you.
I've already said I would like for it to go back to the
Okay.
planning board.
All right. So, yes, I'm sorry, Renee.
I agree with consensus going back. I think Commissioner Sears raised a good point about looking at not just ADUs, but other issues. I mean, there are tracts in town that perhaps could be attractive to multifamily or townhouse type use, and that could strike affordability. But I do have one question, and maybe I'm just not getting it. There was, I think Commissioner Fuller asked a question about lots that are non-conforming of record. Typically, if it's non-conforming, there's limitations on what you can do with it. So therefore, ADUs would not be possible.
If we followed the normal procedures as we used to.
Well, that's my question. I'm just trying to get it straight in my mind. Because being owner of non-conforming, so I'm not in the ADU discussion, but I'm asking a question. If somebody's got, and I use the example down, there are flag lots down at Lower Nags Head before you get to Whalebone that technically are non-conforming lots of record. So would they qualify for an ADU?
Under the draft ordinance, they're not precluded from having an ADU if they're otherwise restricted because of setbacks, lot coverage. They may be precluded from creating additional building area that would allow for an ADU.
Okay. I just would like something to clarify.
I'm happy to clarify that further.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So do we need to do this in the form of a motion?
Yes.
May I ask one more question of the attorney before
Yes,
we
sure.
move forward? Regarding covenants, I happen to live in the same neighborhood as Mr. Fuller, and when I purchased my home, go to closing, no mention of covenants ever. And then we built a storage building on our property. And my neighbor, Howard Cliven, who sort of helped in that development process, came to me, and Howard has since passed, and brought me the covenants. I had never seen them before, which required that everything be attached to the home in some way. Subsequently, we tore down the storage unit, and we built another one that is attached by beams. The covenants in my neighborhood, there's no active HOA. They've never been enforced. They've probably been broken 100 times by pretty much everybody in the neighborhood one way or another. So if there's not an active HOA, a legal HOA that has regular meetings and minutes and votes and those kind of things, is there any way that we can enforce covenants that have never been enforced?
The association always has the right to enforce its covenants. Prior lack of enforcement could be a defense to an enforcement action, so that if an association were to bring an enforcement action, there may be defenses such as latches, which is a defense that's posed when there's been an unreasonable delay in asserting a claim. There may be some other potential defenses, but the fact that a subdivision has an inactive association does not mean that at some point in the future, the association could become reactivated and more aggressive and begin enforcing covenants that have already existed. So that would not preclude the enforcement in the future.
I mean, there is no association, so somebody could attempt to reactivate the association and enforce the covenants that have already been broken?
That's right. That's right. I mean, I don't know of any basis to say that the covenants are no longer enforceable because there has been a delay in formation or activity of the association in general. However, there may be some defenses that can be posed as a result of some of the specific facts of the situation. But you couldn't look at it as there being a blanket prohibition on the ability to enforce them just on the hypothetical that you've posed.
Okay.
If that helps. And by the way, everything you said I took as a hypothetical, not as an admission that there are any potential violations.
When we dispose of this, I have one thing to bring up that's associated
After
with
this. Okay. Then could we get a motion, I suppose, to accept the planning staff's recommendation?
I make a motion to accept planning staff's recommendation to send it back to the planning board and answer their questions, as well as any issues that were raised by the board today, and that the attorney is going to investigate.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Yeah.
Are we going to give any time frame on when we want that, or is it going to go on for ad infinitum? I mean, is it helpful to give them 60 days maybe or something, so that we can move the process forward and not just let it linger?
Yes.
I think my recommendation would be to at least allow them to discuss it at their May and June meetings.
That would fit the
60
timeframe.
days.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do I need to amend the motion? Do I need to make another motion
No,
for that?
I
Would it be
accept
okay?
that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you.
So, right. So the amendment is to refer this back to accept staff's recommendation, refer this back to the planning board for the resolution of these questions, and to give them up to 60 days to do so.
Is it to give them a deadline or to ask them to proceed expeditiously and come up with it in 60 days? Because I don't like giving them a deadline, a hard deadline.
Right.
Because that means we're asking for them to have something on August 1st.
My expectation, speaking as the motioner, is that that's 2 meetings of discussion, and at the end of 2 meetings, they would make a recommendation, no recommendation, or changes to whatever's.
Or that here's where we are in the process.
Right.
Okay, then I'm fine.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And, yes.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
And it's a question for the attorney, but one thing I heard during that discussion was about open and transparent. And the question is, if an individual in town wants to have a private conversation with a planning board member, is that public record?
A verbal conversation?
No, an email.
Yes.
And if that's the case, then I suggest we immediately give all planning board members a town email address that they can have, so that everybody knows to respond through a town email and not on a private email.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I was just going to add, that would be the case for any of the town's other boards or committees.
I agree, okay. So everybody, Board of Adjustments, whomever, should have a town email if they're on a board.
Thank you. Yes.
May I further ask, which I brought up earlier, can we ask that any emails that have transpired regarding this issue or any other town-related issue be forwarded to the town for archive?
It's an appropriate request.
Okay.
They do need to be archived in some fashion. The manager and I have already discussed this particular issue recently. I think there's a plan in the works to address that.
To request planning board members to do that? Okay, thank you.
And to issue addresses.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yes, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Thank you.
Okay, the board will return to order after the recess. Before we proceed to new business, we need to have a motion to accept the letter that was presented earlier during public comment into the town record. So a motion to that effect would be in order. Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Next item is new business, and this would be committee reports. Are there any commissioners who need to report on committee activities?
Only one.
Yes.
CRC met recently in April in Manio at the Dare County Board of Commissioners meeting room, which we're very thankful that they let us use. It's a great facility. One of the things that we did was to unanimously adopt a resolution against offshore drilling and seismic testing. And the other is to, it came about is that meeting was that Dare County's clerk, Gross, is retiring, and he will surely be missed. He is a wonderful, wonderful clerk.
And thank you on behalf of the town, you and the CRC, and you members who worked on that resolution and staff who facilitated that. We appreciate every voice. Despite the pause, we know that that's just, we need to press forward on that issue at every opportunity. Thank you. Susan? Commissioner Fuller.
Just briefly congratulate Chairman Cahoon on getting that CRC resolution as well. That was a lot of work, and one that was needed. That was the organization at the state that needed to say something.
Yes.
And then lastly, the Tourist Bureau had the scoping meeting to look at the event site. A number of board members were there. I think everybody heard generally what was said. I could be wrong again, because it seems like every time I think I hear something, I don't necessarily come away with the same things other people do. The board met the day after. The site was discussed again, and what I heard at that meeting, just the minutes are available, the meeting is available for review. But what I heard was two things. One board member said he heard a need for 1,000-seat building, and that what he heard was from the Nags Head Surfing, Fishing, and the Wedding Association. And then from everybody else, what I heard was low profile, water access, a dock pier walkway, and that's what was discussed at the Tourist Bureau meeting. So one person brought up the need for a large building, and everybody else talked about the need for open space, dock, fit in with the community. I think there's been some general conversation about what is low profile, et cetera, et cetera. And if you look at the Outer Banks Voice and look at the threads that go with it, Molly Harrison probably has about the best explanation about what it means and what I think most people really want.
Thank you. Thank you all. The next item on our agenda would be referrals and presentations from the town attorney.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just have one thing, and that is to inform the board that the Town of Nags Head versus Richardson case has been scheduled for oral argument in the Supreme Court. That is going to be Wednesday, May the 29th. The Supreme Court is celebrating its 200th anniversary, and as a result, it's having arguments held in different places than in the Supreme Court building itself. So this particular oral argument is going to actually be conducted at the State Capitol building in Raleigh. So that'll be May 29, beginning at 9:30 a.m. There are two other cases on the calendar. They're both criminal cases involving convictions for possession of drugs. So the really interesting case will be the Richardson case. The Supreme Court has not yet given any guidance as to what issues they're going to consider. As y'all may remember, the town appealed from a dissent in that case, in the Court of Appeals decision. The Richardsons attempted to cross appeal, which we believe is not available to them given the timing. They also sought the discretionary review of certain issues. We have sought review of certain issues. The court has not specified which of that universe of issues it's going to address yet. So maybe we'll get further clarification on exactly what they're going to decide at the time of the argument. But I wanted to give you all that update on this case since we've finally gotten the case scheduled for hearing.
Give me those dates again, John.
May 29, I believe that's the Wednesday after Memorial Day, I guess, at the State Capitol building beginning at 9:30.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The next item on our agenda are items referred to and presentations from the town manager. The first of those is presentation distribution of the manager's recommended budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. I'll ask Roberta to please hand out the board the 2019-20 manager's recommended budget. While she's doing that, I do want to thank the mayor and members of the board, the commissioners, for allowing me to present for you for consideration the town manager's recommended budget for fiscal year July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2020, which has been prepared in accordance with North Carolina General Statute and North Carolina Local Government Fiscal Control Act, as well as the North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 159-11. This budget was a result of a great deal of hard work from a number of key staff, including the town's department heads and departmental administrative staff. As always, our mission is to serve the citizens, property owners, businesses, and visitors of Nags Head through open governance. This is the first year of a two-year budget cycle. Fiscal year 2019-20 represents the proposed operating budget for the coming year, and fiscal year 2021 represents the financial plan. Since the budget provides a basis for all fiscal policy decisions during a particular period, this budgeting methodology allows the town to be more strategic in its budget planning, reviewing operating expenses, capital projects, and revenues within a two-year window. When preparing their budget, staff was asked to anticipate and plan for expenses over a two-year period. Changes to the financial plan should only occur due to unfunded mandates, changes in board goals, or other unforeseen circumstances. This year's general fund budget totals $23,684,335, which is an increase of almost $5 million, or 26.74% from the fiscal year 2018-19 adopted budget. Of this increase, 73% is attributed to the beach nourishment project. The coming year represents the first year of a 5-year payment of the town's beach nourishment special obligation bond at $3,049,248, as well as the first year of Dare County's first payment, supplemental payment to the town towards the bonds of $600,000. The town will also begin the process of obtaining perpetual easements on those properties that the town does not currently have. which is approximately half the oceanfront, which will solidify future beach nourishment projects in years to come. The remainder of the increase can be attributed to board goals to continue efforts to address stormwater flooding issues in town, enhance our parks and paths, continue with the town's recycling program, and improve sanitation services along the beach road, and also to provide a solid pay plan recommendation to honor our hardworking employees. A 2-cent tax increase is recommended, bringing the ad valorem rate to .30 cents. 1 cent in ad valorem generates $237,527. Breaking this out into the various parts that we're trying to achieve, I'll start with making the point that employees are our greatest asset. And I believe that the board and I share a strong value that the town staff represents its greatest asset. This year, we are looking to implement this value by demonstrating a commitment to our employees. For many years, changes in the economy limited salary adjustments to cost of living and reduced our ability to fund upward mobility with pay ranges. While we remain competitive at the lower end of our salary ranges, we have found that many employees have stagnated with their salary range, which has affected retention. This year, we are recommending a multi-pronged approach, which includes a combination of a cost of living adjustment of 1.6% within grade increases for employees who are meeting performance expectations, which would be 2.5% for employees below the midpoint of the salary range and 1.25% for employees at or above the midpoint. Specific recommendations to address compression of specific employees and a merit bonus for employees who are the greatest of the great and excel in performance. We would propose this plan for the 2-year budget cycle and continue with this plan as funding allows. Stormwater management and maintenance. 3 years ago, the town began work to develop and implement stormwater master plan. This work resulted in the development of specific capital projects to address chronic drainage issues. In fiscal year 2018-19, 3 of these projects were implemented: Gallery Row, Red Drum, NC-12 Village and Nags Head, and Nags Head Acres. For FY 19-20, based on feedback we received from the board during the capital improvement workshops, we propose to implement improvements in the area of Nags Head Pond, around the Satterfield Landing area, Old Nags Head Cove at Kipper Court, and 2 areas in South Nags Head along State Road 1243. We are continuing planning efforts for an innovative drainage project in the area of Wrightsville Avenue near Nags Head Elementary School. This will include 2 phases and will involve the creation of a dune parking lot subsurface infiltration system at the Bonnet Street Bathhouse property. We propose to seek a grant from the Clean Water Management Trust Fund to assist with this project. This will also involve the needed reconstruction of the Bonnet Street Bathhouse parking lot. Creation of a stormwater streets division within the existing public facilities maintenance division will allow implementing a more aggressive stormwater drainage system maintenance plan. This will include 2 dedicated employees, one of which would be newly funded to these tasks. Staff will perform proactive maintenance twice annually to the town's drainage system. This will increase the town's capacity to perform reactive work during storm and flooding events. We are also requesting reinstituting a Deputy Director of Public Works position, which has been vacant since 2013. The Public Works Department is the largest department in the town, both from a budgetary standpoint and the number of employees. There are 2 primary functions, water and public works, as well as 6 divisions. This is the only department in the town without a deputy director. The deputy director position will assist the public works director in coordinating the daily activities of the department. Sanitation and recycling. The board has renewed the town's contract for seasonal recycling collection, and it's modifying the sanitation recycling schedule to improve services within the town. This includes modifying the blue route, which is the beach road, to a predictable Monday and Friday schedule, which is intuitive to visitors and includes collection of trash and recycling on the same day. The contract price is increasing due to the addition of 1 collection day, as well as an increase in the cost of recycling processing. Last budget year, the board approved the addition of a sanitation driver to address growth in housing units and number of carts. This position was funded to begin in May. Therefore, the cost of the position is not fully realized until the coming fiscal year. Parks and pedestrian improvements. The board continues to enhance community services related to parks and paths. For fiscal year 2019-20, we are proposing a final phase of improvements to Dowdy Park. I am recommending replacement of the Jockey's Ridge State Park walkway. We are also planning continued implementation of the town's pedestrian plan, with extension of the multi-use path south of Jockey's Ridge, serving neighborhoods including Soundside Road, South Ridge, Old Nags Head Cove, the south end of the village at Nags Head, and Roanoke Shores. This will also connect to the Soundside event site at the traffic light at Gold Street, which will allow pedestrians to safely cross and access the Wellbone Junction area. We propose to conduct additional drainage work to address issues on the east side of Nags Head Cove in conjunction with this project. Water. In continuation of water rate planning as recommended by the North Carolina Rural Water Association, a 15% water rate increase to the minimum and gallons consumed beyond the minimum are recommended. This is necessary to meet operating, capital, and debt service costs, as well as to address water sales and volume on a decreasing trend. This increase will supplement an additional water plant operator to assist with maintenance tasks and to provide more complete staffing coverage at the water plant, as well as a 5.18% increase in the wholesale water rate. What I'd like to point to now is, is this? Am I doing that or are you? You are. Okay. In the manager's message, you'll see that a couple of highlights. This shows the general fund property values. The adopted current 2018-19 shows real and personal property at about $2.36 billion, and our total valuation at $3.2 billion. You can see from this graph that the recommended slight increase in the general fund property values, both for the recommended budget as well as the financial plan. There is anticipated a slight bit of growth. This chart represents the total recommended general fund revenues. This will depict and show you where the majority of our revenues come from. I think it's important to note that on this graph you'll see, it's hard to see on the screen, but in front of you, ad valorem taxes make up, the property tax generates about $9.3 million in revenue. If you look at occupancy, sales, and land transfer, occupancy tax generates $2.8 million. That's a considerable amount that I think we need to take note of. That helps offset the general property tax rates. We need to be mindful of the benefits that we all realize from that occupancy. Sales tax is close behind that. Land transfer, which is the revenue we generate with the sales of property, is just over $700,000. This chart will give you an idea of, this is again the recommended budget of just over $23 million. This will show you in each piece of the pie where the funds are going, and it'll show that Public Works makes up a large portion of this, $5.2 million, which is an increase this year of 6%. One of the biggest, when you see the planning and development, a lot of that is where we house our grants and funding for the pedestrian plan construction, so that is a little higher. So this gives you an idea of where the funds are spent, how they're allocated, and the increase in those funds. This, I'd like to just point out some of the capital improvement projects that we're recommending in the general fund. Cash funded, we have been talking about unmanned aircraft or a drone for several years now. I have taken it out of the capital improvement plan, which was for 2021, and have been able to find one that we feel like we can fund now, or recommend to you at $23,000. We have a short-term rental tracking registration software of $32,000. I have spoken with the county manager, Bobby Alton, and in anticipation that we would be submitting to the county lists of properties that are being rented short-term, and he can match those against his information, and we can try and determine those properties that may not be paying the occupancy tax. We have a 10-ton trailer budgeted at $15,000 and a physical agility test equipment for the public safety at $8,500. We financed a fuel tank conversion. What this does is it allows us to get our fuel tanks out of the threat of rising groundwater, which we've experienced with some of the last storms. Just over $1.1 million budgeted for pedestrian plan. We have Dowdy Park lighting and decking at $140,000, an excavator at $110,000, and a replacement residential trash truck at $300,000. And off to the right are at the cost of the impact financing these in the recommended budget. And then also we've got listed the 2 grants for the pedestrian plan as well as the Islington Beach access. Looking at water, you can see on this chart the recommended water fund revenues, operating revenues of $3,367,000, and then the water fund expenditures will show you where the $4.2 million is allocated. In capital improvements in the water fund, cash funding Barnes Street, Vestas cement pipe replacement, $235,000. Darren Street to Hollowell Street, replacing a line there with a 12-inch line of $677,000. The water fund's portion of the fuel tank conversion budgeted at 25%. And then if we are able to receive a grant for hazard mitigation, 100% funded for a mobile 6-inch dry prime pump and the use for stormwater projects or stormwater events. Finally, I wanted to, the last 2 pages of the manager's message is a look ahead to fiscal year 2021. We do not anticipate nor are recommending or see that we'll recommend an ad valorem tax increase in 2021. It assumes a levy 1% valuation increase, which I mentioned. Assumes the town of Nags Head's percentage of countywide share revenues will increase. That's dependent on what the other towns do in part. It'll increase to just over 9% from 8.5% for sales tax and to 28.97% from 27.73% for occupancy. And land transfer taxes in fiscal year 2020, assuming no change to levies in Dare County or other towns. We've estimated a 1.5% cost of living adjustment for all employees, with the same 2.5% for below grade and 1.25% increase for those above. An additional $1 per hour for lifeguards. We are anticipating and assuming a health insurance increase of 5%. I would like to point out that the current year there is no health insurance increase realized or budgeted for the recommended budget. And then we've got mandated upon us our additional local government employment retirement system contributions are increasing again in 1.2% for all employees. We've got the second year of beach nourishment in the plan year. Parks and Paths penny will be used for the second of 6 annual debt payments on the pedestrian path as well as the maintenance of the multi-use path. 2021 will see the first year of 3 annual payments for the replacement of our 800 megahertz radios. We've planned for the designs of the Epstein Street bathhouse and the improvements to the skateboard park, and then POW bill funds to be used for Baltic Street and West Oak Knoll. And in the coming months, we need to really start to look at the pavement and conditioning survey that's been done, as well as $62,000 for interior and exterior painting at Fire Station 16. I do want to thank the Deputy Town Manager, Andy Garman, and our Finance Officer, Amy Miller, for their very, very hard work on this. I hope it captures the board's priorities and initiatives, and we look forward to working to get this adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Are there any immediate questions, understanding that we all are just receiving this? Next item then is update on beach nourishment.
I'm going to ask, you're tired of hearing me read, get David Ryan to come up and give you an update on the project that should be seeing sand here within the hours.
Hours, yes. So it's very exciting to report out that we will start seeing sand pumped on the beach this afternoon.
And where will they be starting, David?
Yes.
For people that want an address.
The initial site of pumping will be just south of Limulus Street, around the 10,000 block on South Old Oregon Inlet Road. That is currently where the subline for the Ellis Island is staged. They will be starting there with the placement of dredge material and then working their way south to the southern project limits. So the plan is to work south, work north, and then set up just south of Islington Street by the Outer Banks Pier and continue to work north. And that is all going to be served by the Ellis Island, which is the dredge that will be working in the southern half of the project. That's a 15,000 cubic yard rated hopper dredge. That's the largest dredge in Great Lakes fleet. And then we can expect the Ellis Island, which is a 6,500 cubic yard rated hopper dredge, to come on station here around May 12th or 13th and start in the northern part of town. Their initial placement will start around Hollowell Street, where the subline is currently staged. They will work north all the way up to Bonnet Street and then work south for approximately 4,500 to 5,000 feet. And then they will jump down southward of that point and follow suit with the same process. At this point, all the pre-construction meetings have been conducted with both the state agencies, town representatives, consulting engineers. We've had several rounds of meetings with the contractor. We held a safety meeting in here on Saturday afternoon with the contractor just to report out all those safety items associated with construction. We have been conducting weekly project meetings that we hold every Thursday with the contractor in order to get updates, and have been in close communications with both the consulting engineer and the contractor as issues have arisen along the way. To this point, we've got everything in place. The turtle trawling has begun over the course of the past several days out in the water. We've got the land-based turtle monitoring in place. The nighttime turtle monitoring is going to start this evening, and then the daytime is going to follow suit, which is from dusk to mid-morning. So everything is in place for the town to start accepting sand and spreading it out on the beaches.
Good. Questions? Very glad to hear this. Excited.
And we'll be updating our map every day, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we receive daily reports from the contractor, and so we can take that information and project that on our map.
That's the biggest question everybody's got. Where and when?
All right, just a couple other items of note. There are two of our public beach accesses that are going to be closed to vehicular traffic during the course of construction. They are Forest Street and Junco Street. The contractor is using that, or those two areas, to stage material and equipment. but pedestrian access will still be maintained, and that will be open at those locations.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
No questions? Great. Thank you, David. The next item on the agenda is item J3, enforcement of the tent ordinance on the beach this season.
Thank you. There's an item in your packet that was put together so that this document is meant to explain the town's process, how we're going to go through to get everyone on the same page and communicate the same message from the beginning of the season, and so that we can stay consistent. Mike Norris, the public facilities superintendent, is here. He's largely tasked with the removal of tents that are left up on the beach. He had some input, and I appreciate his help and buy-in to this process. It's also meant to educate that you can use this information to help answer any questions that you may be presented with. Once we get done and formalize this after this discussion, this will be shared with all staff. It'll help with the messaging from those that get the receptionists at Town Hall, those that get the receptionists at Public Works, at the Fire Department and the Police Department. They'll be on the same message. As the lifeguards start to come in, this will be part of their message and part of their need-to-know information. So that's kind of how this was put into place. And this is about, I think, the 4th year that we've been doing this. I firmly believe that if all the property managers have not received this message and have not carried it on to their renters and guests, that there's really no reason. I believe that message has been carried. But I'll start with this document. It's entitled Enforcing Ordinances Related to Beach Tents and Canopies. It starts with just kind of a general policy type statement that the reason we're doing this is to keep Nags Head beaches safe, clean, and enjoyable for everyone. The town's adopted several regulations related to beach tents and canopies. So you'll know how we're going to handle the tents that are left on the beach. The regulation that beach tents and canopies shall not be left unattended, as well as other personal items between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. daily. The town facility maintenance division will monitor the beach every morning, Monday through Friday, beginning Memorial Day until the Friday after Labor Day. And any tents and umbrellas that are found during that time frame will be removed. The process will start with one employee beginning at 8th Street and working their way south, and another employee will start at McCall Court and work their way north. And we anticipate the trucks will meet somewhere in the middle. Now, in the past, the employees will be able to figure out pretty quickly where the concentration of tents are on the beach, and they'll work that area a little more aggressively than others. As a general rule, this is where they'll start, but they know that they can make adjustments as necessary. Facilities maintenance is prepared to adjust as necessary to make this program work and to continue to educate the public. These tents are thrown away. The ordinance is written to treat these items that are left as being abandoned. And therefore, we don't collect them, we don't store them anywhere, we don't facilitate the owners trying to come back and find these. We treat these as abandoned, and we remove them as quickly and safely as we can, but not in a manner that it's intended to return these. The other part of that regulation, and I'm speaking now about there's broken into two parts. The second part is for the business. The concierge service is treated a little bit differently, so this is just the people that bring their own. Regulation that the beach tents, canopies, and awnings shall not be greater than 12 feet by 12 feet in area, not higher than 9 feet above the surface of the ocean beach when erected, and they must be separated by a minimum of 10 feet. So the large part of this is going to be a little bit less aggressive in enforcement, and we'll be relying on our ocean rescue staff and our beach police officer to monitor the beach for violations of this ordinance. We have information that all the lifeguards have and that the beach police officer has. This is all the need-to-know rules pertaining to the beach. It's written It's written so that, people are aware, they're educated, they know not to bring, that their dogs must be on a leash. It talks about the public safety of not digging a hole or filling it in, listening to the lifeguards. And it also talks about items left unattended. In our town brochure that the guys on the beach in the morning, in case they are stopped by someone that says, "Why are you taking this down?" they can just simply share that this is a town ordinance, we're adhering to the town ordinance, and this is the information. We don't want them to engage or get into any type of confrontation, but we also want to defend them with the regulations, so they'll have that with them as well. But the ocean rescue staff, as well as the beach police officer, will monitor, and all observed violations will be reported and handled by the on-duty beach police officer. The officer will use their judgment in determining if the beachgoer is willing to cooperate and comply with the ordinance. What we're hoping for is we don't want to issue citations for those that aren't complying with this. That is an option that's listed in the ordinance. It's spelled out, but that's, I think, a last resort. We want to try and approach this from, the town code does not allow you to tie these tents together. They need to be separated by 10 feet, and that's so that public safety can get to and from the places that they need to be in responding. So would you please, tomorrow when you come, please don't set these up in that manner. All staff on the beach, including Public Works, Ocean Rescue, and Police, will be equipped with informative flyer containing the rules and regulations governing use of the beach, as well as other important town information. So we won't just educate them on this. If they'll allow us, we'll educate them on other things. If the collection crew is stopped by an owner prior to the removal of the tent, they will be given the flyer, answer any questions regarding the ordinance, and ensure that the tent is being removed. Hopefully, the daily exposure and education, the number of tents left out to be collected will be minimal. And I do want to share with you how we've communicated these requirements. These rules are on signs at multiple beach accesses. The rules are on signs at lifeguard stands. They're in our brochures. They're in clings for rental homes, refrigerators, rental home refrigerators, like magnets, but can stick on more things. Roberta has communicated this through social media. The kind of the mantra of the Park Service, leave only tracks or leave only footprints. We've put this in newspaper ads and articles, and we communicate to property managers on multiple occasions. Now, if you don't have any questions about all that, I'll go into the concierge services.
I'll ask if the commissioners have questions. I'll start on this end. Well,
I'll defer to the end.
Okay. That's what I thought you all would say.
The one thing, I totally agree with education and trying to get people to comply. But if an officer or somebody encounters somebody that's in clear violation, are you saying we're not going to ask them to comply until the next day?
I think what I'm asking is that the police officer use his discretion in determining whether or not if that situation warrants a citation. And remember, the violations of this section shall be subject to the penalties described in Town Code Section 1-6B. And that's a misdemeanor.
Right.
And I hesitate unless the violator is giving the police officer no other alternative to issue this citation. So I'm leaving it up to the police officer. I have faith and confidence that they'll be able to make that decision. But if it warrants a citation, then they'll issue a citation. If they're not willing to move it, or if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they're already set up and there's really nowhere else for them to move it easily, then I think he just has to play it by ear. So to answer your question, I am not instructing the police officers, unless the board tells me otherwise, to issue citations in all cases.
Appreciate your directness, and I absolutely agree. Police should have discretion. I hope that we take the opportunity to educate people early in the morning before they set up a bunch of umbrellas together or tents together.
That ideally, that if we see them setting up, we catch them then and there.
Right. And we should concentrate on that, to
Well-
educate them at that time.
And I will say this, there's one beach police officer for 11 miles, and the lifeguards, while in some cases they may be able to address the tent that's being set up, their first primary responsibility is to look forward, not side to side. So I don't want to give the board the impression that we are going to, I don't want you to go down to the beach, you see tents that are 9 feet apart from each other instead of 10, and you think we're not doing our job. The lifeguard's primary focus is to make sure that people are safe. I hear exactly what you're saying, and that's exactly what we'll do. I just hope the board's willing to accept that some of these, that we're not going to get 100% compliance on this, but we're going to try. We're not ignoring the ordinance. We're not ignoring the wishes. But if a tent's 9 feet together, 9 feet, and nobody drowns, it's been a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Walters. Commissioner Cahoon?
The beach concierge service is a little bit different. It requires, this is a police power. The town code, chapter 12 requires that, the tent companies, the concierge services have to register, and we're in the process of getting that done now. They have to, they're a little bit different. Those that are set up for business can't be set up before 7 a.m. and shall be removed by 6 p.m. So their hours of operation are a little bit different than the general user. And I've got listed in this memo the requirements list, and I won't go through all those and spell those out, but town staff will issue permits and provide information to each concierge service regarding these regulations. We think there's about 6 companies that operate, so it's very much easier for us to communicate with them on the spot. We can if it's the ocean rescue captain, he can notify the owner of this business on the spot a little bit easier than he can with others. So I think we can be more aggressive, and that was the part of the intent, I believe. All staff working on the beach will be made aware of this ordinance, as well as the companies that have been permitted under the provisions of this ordinance. As ocean rescue staff are coming off the beach in the evening, they will notify the ocean rescue captain of any of these tents that remain on the beach that were placed by one of the permitted concierge services. Code enforcement officer will be informed of these tents and will contact the business owner to gain compliance. Violations will follow a progressive plan as described in item I above. What that is any violation of these regulations may result in the following citations: removal of the beach equipment, which is a given, automatic; issuance of a civil penalty, which is kind of a strike 2, and then strike 3 if we continue to not get compliance with the regulations, we'll revoke the permit, and they'll no longer be able to provide the service. And again, we'll remove rental equipment in violation of this provision as soon as time allows. These tents will be captured in the morning pickup if they're left. I'm a little bit less concerned about these vendors as I am the people that may just not know, and there will be some of those.
Okay.
If this satisfies the board, I'll carry this message forward.
Questions? Commissioner Sears? Commissioner Cahoon?
Appreciate the update.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
I've got, if it's okay, Mayor, we've got Bike to School Day and the Bike Rodeo coming up next week. If I could get the Deputy Planning Director, Kelly Wyatt, to come up and invite the board to participate, but to also share with you what's happening.
Yes, so we do have 2 events, Safe Routes to School events coming up. The first one we have is Monday, May 6th, and that's going to be the Bicycle Rodeo at Nags Head Elementary School. We have a lot of organizations coming together to help out with this, but the Bike Rodeo is essentially where kindergarten through 5th grade get to take their recess break, and they come out, and the police department gives them a presentation on bicycle safety. We have an obstacle course set up so each child that wants to ride can go through that obstacle course and learn proper bicycle safety. We also provide helmets to every third grader during this event, so those are being provided by the Outer Banks Hospital. We have snacks, waters being provided by Harris Teeter and Food Lion. And at the end, when they're finished with their bicycle informational piece, we have the fire department available with a fire truck. So the kids can go over there and then learn more about fire as well. So that's really exciting. That's May 6th. It's going to start at about 8 a.m. and it wraps up at about 2 p.m. And then the Wednesday, the same week, Wednesday, the 8th, we have the bike to school day. And I think everyone's familiar with that. We essentially have 3 locations designated within the town. The Central Square Shopping Center, the shops at 10.5, and then at Villa Dunes Drive. And we encourage kids to come to those locations between 7 and 7:20 a.m. And then we have representatives from the town, other town departments, if any of the Board of Commissioners would like to be available at any of those locations. And we just bike the kids into the elementary school. Once they get there, they get some treats, some stickers, some cool pencils, things like that. So it's a really fun event, and everyone's welcome to attend. They'll come out.
Repeat the date and the time again, Kelly, so everybody will hear it again.
So the bicycle rodeo, Monday, May 6th, it starts at 8 a.m. and it's going to finish up around 2 p.m. And then the bike to school day, if you would like to participate, just be at a designated location around 7 a.m. Bring your bike, bring your helmet, and plan to bike these kids to school. School's going to pick up at 7:50, so you're going to have your kids to Nags Head Elementary by 7:50. You can leave from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rodeo's fun. I've been there, done that, so it's a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to request a closed session in accordance with General Statute 143-318-11A5 to consider the acquisition of property located at 115 McCall Court in South Nags Head, as well as to confer with the attorney under the attorney-client privilege.
Thank you.
On another matter.
Okay. You've heard the request. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The board will be in closed session. Okay, the board has returned to open session, and I would ask either Town Attorney Leidy or the town manager, I will ask Town Attorney Leidy to report out of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The board did discuss the acquisition of the property located at 115 McCall Court. The board also discussed other matters that were within the attorney-client privilege. Some direction was given to the town manager and the town attorney, but no other actions were taken in closed session.
Okay. And it would be appropriate now to take action on acquisition of the property?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a motion would be in order to accept the deed.
To accept the conveyance of the property located at 115 McCall Court in South Nags Head.
Thank you.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Board of Commissioners agenda, and I will start with Commissioner Fuller because I know he's holding a resolution.
I hate to bring up something as a surprise, but I think all of us probably, if we checked our email, received some from the League Municipality, and I think everybody's got one, but received some from the League of Municipality yesterday about a bill that was introduced. It's House Bill 645 and Senate Bill 534. And the net effect of this bill will be to override municipalities' governance of billboards within municipalities, among other things. And so what the call from the league is to try to take action as quickly as possible to get with your state representative, your senator, that we oppose this bill. And so our only opportunity right now is at this meeting. So I've provided you with the resolution. I'll read it if you want me to, or you can accept that, that we oppose the House bill and the Senate bill, which revises outdoor advertising laws, and urge state legislators to oppose this bill. I don't see a need to read it, but
No,
if you want me to, I will.
No, I don't think that we necessarily need to read that aloud. I would suggest further that because as I don't know, the league pointed out some urgency, the mayor's listserv pointed out greater urgency. Based on that, I spoke with Representative Hannig. I would suggest that if we approve this resolution, that it be signed and immediately shared with our representatives today.
And other towns in Dare County.
Yes. Thank you.
I'd make a motion to adopt the resolution and to further send it out via fax today.
Okay, very good. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the resolution and to send it to all parties today. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will stay there. Commissioner Fuller, do you have anything else?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Walters?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
Two things. One is item that came up in public comment this morning versus the Altoona versus Seagull. Is it Seagull?
Yes, ma'am.
The new address. I'd like for you to explain to everyone how the new address came about.
Yes, ma'am. Are you able to pull up the address or the lot? I don't know if it helps or not to be able to see this on a map.
But before while they're pulling that up, a couple things. It is a private street. The people on that street have the right to assess any improvements to everybody on the street, including the new addressee, which the town does not have. I'm stating this for the record so that people can hear exactly what. Anything they do in that neighborhood, they have the right to assess everybody in that neighborhood on it, which the town does not have the right to have. But I do want the people to know how they suddenly ended up with a Tuna Street.
Okay, perfect. How far are you? The lot that's in red, it's kind of hard to tell, but if you, before these two lots were combined, if you draw a straight line there, there were two separate lots. This is the 219 Altoona. This is the property on Seagull. This is Seagull Drive. This is Altoona. This house is also, these two houses are owned by the same family, the Telescos. Now, when this, and the Telescos own this lot. When they recombined the two lots, this is what they have now. Their septic tank for this property sits here. When they recombined, they were, I'm assuming, asked by the Register of Deeds how to address. They own both properties. They chose 219 Altoona for address purposes, and I guess that would be for the purpose of dispatching any calls to this address would be through 219. Now, they still can access the property from Seagull. Seagull's a public street, and they still have a deeded access through this subdivision and onto this property. Day before yesterday, staff went down and looked at this site. I'm getting ahead. But that's how the 219 Altoona came about. Staff, some of the property owners had asked about the non-compatible fill, what type of service they could use for their driveway or for parking. The static line, they mapped as best they could. There doesn't appear to be any violations of non-compatible fill now. Any fill brought in, because there's no, right now I mean, you saw the pictures, there's really no access to this property right now, and I don't think there's a septic tank. I don't think there's a water line. But I'm sure eventually those requests will be made. But the rule is they'd have to bring in compatible fill. But I went beyond your question, but that hopefully answers it.
Well, just to give you a little background, they have been denied a variance to use alternative methods for a driveway
Yes.
by the Coastal Resources Commission. They
They-
did apply, and they were denied.
As was the Cherry House. They tried to get oyster shells for their driveway. and
That'd be bad.
That was
They
denied.
were denied.
That's good.
Those variances were not granted.
Can I ask a question? And I guess partly to the attorney. Since they recombined those lots and they have an Altoona address, the Altoona property owners, they can be assessed for street expenses.
The dumpster.
The dumpster. Would that assessment be only on the part of the property that was originally in Altoona, or would it be on the entire property? Now that they've combined and asked for an Altoona address?
Yeah. I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
I'll try and get an answer to that question.
Okay.
My assumption is that the whole property could be, but I'll clarify that.
Thank you. Any other questions or observations?
You've answered my questions on that. I have one more issue. A few months ago, I believe it was Commissioner Fuller asked about our street paving and Satterfield Landing. Over the weekend, I was down on Satterfield and had a couple questions asking, yelling at me out of windows, as a matter of fact, when are you going to repave this street? And my comment was, soon. I then talked to the deputy planning director on Monday and got somewhat a different answer, and I'm confused.
I was under the impression that it was this fiscal year, and I've been telling people that. So if
We
it's
approved the money
soon,
July 1st, so
soon
I
better
kind
be
of like to
July
know
1st.
what the holdup is, what the update is, and where are we going with when we budget money in one fiscal year and the projects don't get done.
We contracted with an outside engineer to get that project done because of other time constraints. And we have not been able to get that project.
Did you ever hear of firing the outside engineer and getting a new engineer if they're not performing?
Yes, ma'am.
So
And-
where are we with this year's street pavings?
Well, you're right, Satterfield Landing is supposed to be done, should have been done by now, because now it's kind of late to be paving a street this time of year with the traffic anticipated to come in. We can proceed to get it done. At one point, we were contemplating, because it had taken so long, that we would work through this in the fall with the overlay, but that's dragging it out. I don't, if I can get it done sooner rather than later, is there a window of time?
Is this the only street project we're doing this year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we can't get one project done in a year. That doesn't speak well for us moving forward
ma'am, it
with a lot of other projects. You're letting an outside contractor dictate the town's priorities.
You're right. It should have been done by now.
And if Quibble or whomever it is
It
can't
wasn't
be-
Quibble.
Okay. Mike Robinson.
Yes,
If he can't get the job done, hire somebody else. I mean, we're now 11, starting the 11th month of the fiscal year for one project.
I'll expedite it.
It just doesn't speak well for us as a town,
No, ma'am.
especially when we're telling people in previous board meetings as little as 2 months ago that we were getting it done.
Thank you.
And the
Message
board's not getting an update.
Got it.
Okay. I was going that way.
That way. It's Mike's
I'm good.
Okay. All right, thank you. See, if I go the same direction every time, I remember where I am. But when I try to alternate, I get confused. And on the mayor's agenda, Cliff and I attended the Beaches, Inlets, and Waterways Conference. The last couple of days was a lot of good information. It was very policy-oriented. There was lots of good information shared there. One of the best things that was actually, it's relatively, it's not minor. There was a presentation by a representative of the South Carolina Aquarium about plastics in the ocean. And they have an app that you can put on your phone. And I immediately went to the App Store and got it. And basically, you create an account, and when you go out and collect trash, anybody can do it anywhere in the world. It's not for South Carolina. Somebody in Saudi Arabia is using it. But you go, you pick up your trash, you log it into the app, you can put a picture, you can put comments, and it all goes into public domain. So through the app on your phone, you can go to a dot anywhere. There are a bunch of dots on there. Click on that and see what kind of trash, what quantities, comments people have made. She gave some success stories where there was a lot of trash being found. This was actually at a subdivision, on the beach, on a subdivision in South Carolina. There was a lot of a particular kind of trash related to vendors who were doing events around the beach access. Because people had logged in so many incidences of finding this kind of trash, they were able to go to that vendor and go to that subdivision and change their behavior because they had actual documentation of the trash. And she gave the example, she said, if you do a marsh cleanup and there's 1,000 cups from one particular fast food restaurant out there, go to them and say, your trash, you're advertising out there in the marsh by trashing the place. So, so it's a super easy download. It's super easy to do. And I think if everybody in Nags Head would do that, we could contribute data that we could use and that would be part of a larger solution. So I thought that was really cool.
That is really cool. That's a great idea. As you're talking about that, it occurs to me that we have 3 fishing piers in Nags Head. It'd be nice if there was some way to get a cooperative agreement with them and maybe a grant opportunity to install a sea bin on each pier that sucks plastics and trash in. It just has to be emptied every day. But if somehow we could act as a granting agency on some applications or something to put sea bins. They're very prevalent in Australia. There's one they've installed in Virginia Beach, very few of them on the East Coast, but they actually are electric, and they suck it in and you clean it out.
Sort the trash.
It just
Pour it
sucks
in.
all the debris in around it, but it acts as a steady current to do so.
I will follow up on that. Thank you. The other thing, because you may see some press on this, is that there's locally a conference of mayors next week, next Wednesday, here, that is hosted by Secretary Michael Regan, Chairman of the Board of Commissioners Bob Woodard, and I. All of the mayors from the CAMA counties have been invited. We have a fair amount of attendance projected, along with board chairs from the counties that did not have municipalities in them. The discussion will be offshore drilling and testing And the hope is that we have discussion and further arm our fellow mayors to be more vocal, and for us to be able to have a strategy for legislative action on this to bring more pressure to bear on this topic.
Where is the location? I know the date.
It will be at the Dare Center at 1 o'clock. It's May the 8th, 1 o'clock at the Dare Center. And there is a press plan that's being developed by the Secretary's office. Is there other business to come before us?
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
Since you just attended NC Byways, and in light of the mayor's meeting coming up, most of the 20 coastal counties that are, beaches, inlets, and waterways that are members of NC Byways, is there any movement there for NC Byways to take a position on oil and gas drilling? Because it seems like that is, of all, or of many organizations that certainly should be working to protect our coast, North Carolina beaches, inlets, and byways should be right there near the top.
Yes. Late to the game, but the executive director assured me that it would be on the next meeting agenda.
Okay. I look forward to that. And when is the next meeting?
That would be the fall?
No, there'll be a board of directors meeting, but it hasn't been scheduled yet.
Okay.
But I'll get that date, and I'll attend and ask that it be considered if it's not.
Well, can you just ask that it be on the agenda?
Yes,
For
yes.
discussion?
I will verify in
Because
writing.
they're like way late to the party.
Yes, they are.
I'll confirm via email that it is on the agenda.
They are late. Okay, thank you. Any other business? In that case, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Wait, let me ask this.
I'm sorry.
Are we going to
Yes, I'm
continue
sorry.
this to the 15th?
Thank you very much, because I had that written there and just didn't see it. So, what time is that meeting on the 15th?
Isn't it set at 9?
9
That's what I have on
a.m.?
my calendar.
Okay. So we will actually recess to the May 15th, 9 a.m. meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for that recess. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.